How's it going, guys? Let's go ahead and jump into our guide. This is going to be an in-depth guide, so pause when needed. First thing we're going to go over is our requirements. That is going to be the Regicide quest. Let's go ahead and jump into the actual skill requirements. That's going to be 75 magic, 80 range, 70 defense, 80 hit points, and 45 prayer for protection prayers. You can have lower or higher. It will be a little bit harder with lower stats, just to let you know. Next thing we're going to jump into is how we're going to get to Zulrah. The first way is going to be BJS. It does have an agility requirement of 76, which is boostable. Then we have our charter ships to Port Tyrus and our Zul-Andra teleports, which are kind of expensive. Now we have our plugins, item charges, and item charges improved, which is going to help us keep track of our charges on our ring of recoil and our ring of suffering. And we have our Zulrah helper. I'm going to go ahead and show a graph on screen from the actual wiki Zulrah strategies. And this just kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to be looking at. We have 4 cycles, and it goes from top to bottom, and then the 4 cycles are left to right. It'll make more sense later on. We're going to go in depth more. I just wanted to give everybody a brief overview. First thing we're going to talk about actually about Zulrah is magic. So when you go in using a magic setup, this is what I recommend. Best gear on the left, worst gear on the right. And I'm going to show you some kills as well. Probably not a magic kill because it's not my preference. Magic and range. So if you were to bring both to make switches, because he does have weaknesses to both on different phases, this is kind of what that would look like based on the gear that you have. Last but not least, we'd have range only. This is my preferred method. I do like the crystal helm with the Bofa, which is the bow of Farandine. Again, pause if you need to. Now I want to go ahead and jump into the actual mechanics of Zulrah. When he's in the range phase, he'll be using range only attacks unless on Jad Phase, and his weakness is magic attacks. You can still use range, but I mean, he is more weak to magic. Next we have his blue phase, which is going to be his magic phase. He uses magic and range phase attacks, but we're also going to pray mage the entire time. So you will take damage throughout this phase, and his weakness is range attacks. The last phase that we have is going to be his melee phase, his red phase. He does attack you with melee, but it is completely dodgeable. His weakness is going to be magic attacks as well. So he's mostly weak to magic throughout the fight, but again, you can use range. It is totally fine. I want to go over some side things, including snakelings. And we're going to be wearing a ring of recoil or a ring of suffering to kill those snakelings for us. They only have 1 HP. They do some good damage, so we want to be kind of careful. They might stack us out quickly, plus Zulrah attacking us. Next we have our venom clouds. That's going to be constant damage if you're standing in them and will poison you with venom, so you want to avoid those. You want to watch the helper about where to stand. So the 3 important things that we're going to go ahead and jump into, that's going to be the Jad phase, where to stand, and the 4 cycles. These are really the basis of the fight. Once you've mastered these 3 things, that's when you really start to have like a good understanding, and the fight starts to get a lot smoother. Again, just showing that cycle graph on screen for anybody wondering. You can always pause.
Alright, let's go ahead and jump into the Zulrah helper plugin. My voice might sound a little bit different because this is outside of the editing process. But let's go ahead and jump into it. So on the right side of my screen, that's what we're going to focus on. It's a little hard to see, I know, but don't worry too much about it right now because you're going to have this helper or plugin on your end as well. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm going to search up the Zulrah helper plugin. I'm going to go into the settings, and I'm going to turn on a few things to make my life easier. We're going to turn on prayer icons. You can turn on attack icons and snakeling icons so you know when they're going to come, and you can also put on a dark mode. I'm not going to worry too much about anything else, just wanted to go over some of the things you can to make your Zulrah plugin helper look a little bit more like mine. So on the right side of our screen, we have our Zulrah helper plugin, and we have the paths that it can take. Now, even though there's 4 cycles, it's only going to look like there's 3, because when we click on the melee cycle, we have 2 options, and then that will take us down 2 more cycle paths. And at the top right, we have our reset button. So let's just go ahead and jump into a kill real quick. I'm not actually going to show the kill just yet. I'm going to show the kill with me using the helper, but I want to explain this in depth. So say that we're on the melee cycle, and he always starts range, so the second time he comes up from the water, he is red. I'm going to click on the red. The X's are where to stand. It has 2 X's because we're going to be using those corners to dodge the melee attacks. After the melee cycle, once he goes down, I know he's going to come up with Mage because we are in the melee phase. And then after he goes down for Mage, he's going to come up of one of 2 sides. He's either going to come up in front of you or on the right. And as you can see, if he comes up on the right, we don't need to worry because he'll just be shooting the venom clouds. But if he comes up in front of us, we will need to pray range as the prayer icon is indicating. So let's say it comes up on the left. Let's go ahead and jump into it. This is going to show us where we need to stand, what we need to pray, and what he's going to come up with next. So we preemptively know what's about to happen in the fight. But it is your job, you can hotkey, to actually go through and click on each one. And the order it goes in is from left to right. So we're going to go left, mage, right, next is range, and then we're going to go down to the other left on the next row, which is going to be melee, and then over right, which is mage. So now that you kind of understand how the actual helper works, I'm just going to click on screen so you can see me going through those phases. Again, that's going to be start up here. We see him at the front, we click here, and then we just follow left to right. So down to the next row, left to right, down the next row, left to right. As you can see on this phase, we do have two icons here, two prayer icons. It wants us to pray range and mage. So how that works is this is our actual Jad phase, just to make it a little more brief. If you've done the fight capes, he's going to be hitting us with two combat styles, and we have to pray against him. Luckily, we know what to pray, so everything will be fine. The first thing it wants us to pray, which is on the left side, which is going to be range, and the next thing it wants us to pray is on the right side, which is going to be mage. So we're going to just jump into another one real quick. Say that we were on the range phase, or range cycle, as we call it. We would do the same thing. We know on mage, we pray mage, we stand in the middle front, and then Zulrah's going to come up on our right, pray range, we stand in the middle of the front, Zulrah comes up in front of us in a range phase, and so on and so on. And then when we get down to the bottom, we can see our Jad phase. On this one, the phases are a little bit different. He doesn't always Jad on the same time, on the same side, and he doesn't always Jad with the same attack. So with this side, he will be using mage, because mage is on our left of our helper. We see that mage left, and we see range right. So he's going to use mage first, then he's going to range, then he's going to mage, then he's going to range. And he's going to keep going through that. So the rule of thumbs is, once you see the attack visually, pray the next attack, because you have to be praying before the attack happens, otherwise you're still going to get hit. So again, if he's on this side, left side, like he is on this Jad phase, and our helper, we're preemptively praying mage, switching to range once we see the mage in midair, switching back to the mage once we see the range in midair. And we just flip that until the basically Jad phase is over. And once we get down with the Jad phase so that we don't kill him in time, we now have our mage phase, which is fine, and we're going to run back to the start. And then as soon as that phase is over, the cycles restart. So he could go down the melee path, he could go down the range cycle. We're not going to know, so we're going to hit our restart button once that last phase ends, and we're back fresh, and we're going to follow the rule of thumbs again. So he's going to start in range, and then what he comes up with next is going to help us decide where he is in this cycle. So that's just a little overview of the actual helper, how to use the helper, how to make it work for you. Next thing we need to actually jump into is some kills. So let's go ahead and jump into those kills.
Okay, so now the first kill that we're going to jump into is melee cycle with Ranger South. I'm going off the compass, but I have my camera turned around, so don't be thrown off. I'm going to run to my start spot. This is where I always start the kill. I'm going to be using my helpers, so the first thing I'm going to watch for is the next thing to pop up. It was melee, so I clicked melee. I'm going to run diagonally down to the other corner so I don't get hit by his tail, as you can see, trying to dodge it before it comes. I know in melee cycle he's always going to start mage, so I preemptively get my prayers up and I start spam clicking. You can't attack in the first couple of ticks when he pops up, so you do need to click a couple times. It is helpful. As you can see, I'm also spamming some things like Vengeance and Thralls because I am on the lunar spellbook swap. He's in range south on the compass, technically in front of us, so I clicked on the range south. So now that I know exactly what the rest of this cycle has entailed for me. I know that next he's going to pop up in melee to the right side of me, and I need to keep standing on the X, which is where I'm already standing, so I should be safe. So these tiles I have marked behind the pillars are safe spots against the meleeer. He cannot hit you when you are on the pillar, and the pillars are the only safe spots. So there's two of them, one where the snakelings are, one where I am right now. I know he comes up in mage. I do like to spam that vengeance because again in the mage phase he's going to be hitting us with mage and range attacks. Those range attacks can hit very hard. So I hit my vengeance, gonna heal up a little bit. Now I know he's in range on the south side, so I run to the X quickly before the phase fully starts, and I'm praying range. After this range, we are going to have Mage. It's going to be in front of us, and we don't need to move, because again, we are just following that X. So I switch my Mage, I click on the Helper. I like to cast Vengeance again because those range attacks smack. After Mage, it looks like that we have the range on the right side. Now, I know by heart that that is going to be my Jad Phase. If you did edit your Zulrah helper to have the attack styles, it will show you that it is going to be the Jad Phase. And he's going to start range on this phase. Again, this is more muscle memory for me, but we did go over this. And as soon as I see the visual, I'm switching. So I see the range, back to Mage. See the Mage, back to range. Because we need to switch before the next attack comes out, so... As you can see, those snakelings they hit pretty hard, so you got to be really careful with those snakelings. If it wasn't for the Ring of Suffering, I could easily get stacked out and they would just keep damaging me. So now that that Jad phase is over, I'm back to the start where it wants me to be, and we are in the last phase of this cycle. As you can see, sometimes when you don't kill them fast enough, you will end up going into the next cycle. So I click on the cycle restart. After the final one, he always comes back up in range, because that is what he starts with. I hit the restart at the bottom of my helper, and now it's giving me the options to decide what direction I want to go. It does look like I kill him here, so we don't need to worry about tracking anymore. Now let's go ahead and jump into our next kill. I'm going to go through all of them, so feel free to fast forward, feel free to jump ahead if you need to the phase that you maybe are least comfortable with. So now we have the melee cycle with the ranger on the right. So he's no longer on the south. This time he's going to come up on our west, which is going to be the right side with where my camera's facing. So there is our melee. This is the indicator. The second thing he came up on was melee. So at the top right on the plugin, I would click on the red one so that I would know where I'm at. So here we are, red. I know next in melee cycle is always Mage. That's always going to be the third one. So I'm praying Mage. I'm in my spot. Now this is where we have to decide again in that melee phase which route we're going to take, whether that's going to be the left or right. I see him come up on the right, so on the helper, I click on the correct square for the side he came up, and now it's telling me exactly what the rest of the cycle is. A good rule of thumb you can follow is anytime you're in melee cycle, he's always going to jad you on the right. When he's in his range or mage cycle, meaning he came up with range or mage on his second time coming out of the water, I know that he's going to jad me on the left. If he jads on the left, rule of thumbs, he will start mage. If he jads on the right, he's going to start range. So these are just some things that you can memorize, and it'll become muscle memory over time. It'll just make these kills go more smoothly because you won't have to take nearly as much damage. You can do maybe 2-3 kills a trip. So again, just following that helper, those snakelings are damaging me, but luckily every time they damage me, the Ring of Recoil or Ring of Suffering will kill them. You can pray Mage against the snakelings, but again, you're going to have to switch for Zulrah, so it's not going to be super effective. Really the best thing you can do is kind of tank the damage. I wouldn't recommend killing him. It's a little bit tedious and you're going to lose DPS on the boss, and loss of DPS is just more food you're going to have to eat when you end up in like a blue phase, like right now. As you can see, we are in that blue phase, so we need to be careful. I'm camping that mage prey, and every time I get hit by a range, I'm taking a lot of damage, so I'm preemptively eating just to keep my health high, because again, those snakelings, if they stack me out and he hits me with 2 or 3 ranges, I mean, I could pretty much get KO'd. So now we know we are on the Jad phase. I started range. As soon as I saw the range, I switched to mage. As soon as I saw mage, I switched to range, vice versa, all the way through. I have a feel muscle memory wise for when we're at the end of the cycle. So you will see me run preemptively before the end of the cycle, which is going to be right now, and that's to help avoid a lot of the venom. I didn't avoid all of it, clearly, but that is to help avoid a lot of that venom. Now we're on the final part of this cycle, and he's ending in melee. I know if I don't kill him here, I'm going to need to hit the cycle refresh. And just another note, I'm going to be a little redundant in these things, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands what's happening here. He is always, after a cycle, going to come up in range. So now that we're at the start of the cycle, I just need to follow the order again. So let's see what he comes up in. He comes up in melee, so we are in a melee cycle. So again, just repeat. Click on melee. Dodge his melee attacks every time they're coming. I tank this one with Vengeance, but it doesn't register. And we are in Mage, which is always the third. Luckily I killed him, so that fight was over. Let's go ahead and jump into our range cycle. Again, little techniques you can do is you can cast Thralls, you can use Venge, you can use the Lunar spellbook with spellbook swap so that you can hit Venge and then cast your Thrall and then it'll put you back on Lunars. So there is some good ways to add some extra DPS to the fight just to make it a little bit quicker. I can see that on the second phase he came up range and he came up on my left, so I hit range and now I know I'm in the range cycle. And there's only 4 cycles, so it's not super confusing, we just have to follow what we see. I'm getting ready because in the range cycle, I like to run to the far right side. Even though the X is on the left, you can stand on the X. It is a safe spot, but I do like to run to the far right side. It helps kind of avoid snakelings. It's a little bit less damage than I'm going to have to take. As you can see on the other side, the snakelings are stuck and they do not path around to me. So that's just maybe 10, 20 less damage that I had to take throughout the fight. So these are just little strategies you're going to pick up along the way as you get used to what you're working with. I know he's coming up in Mage next, so you saw me hit Mage. I don't want to walk through the Venom Clouds so they disappear, so I'm just hanging out right here. And you're going to see me slowly rotate to where the X wants me to be. We know that the next phase is going to be range, so again, I'm right where the X wants me to be. We're praying correctly. I know he is Mage next, so you saw me preemptively hit my Vengeance in case I do get hit by a range. It does just help do a little extra DPS, speed these kills up. Something I do want to mention while I'm going through this right now is that gear is totally preference based. You're wondering to yourself, like, what gear should I use? It's really based on levels and what you can afford. As you can see with worse gear, if you're using a Trident of the Seas and you have 70, 75 magic, I mean, your kills are going to take a lot longer. But if you're using a Sang Staff and you have 85 magic, you're going to be self-healing off the Sang. The kills will go a little bit faster. If you're using range, because he only has one phase that's really weak to range, sometimes the kills are going to go a little bit slower. I have 99 range and I'm usually using a range potion, so it does kind of help push through those high range defense phases, which would be his range phase and his melee phase. And we really want to maximize DPS on the blue phase if we're using range, because that is really where we're getting the most DPS out. We're going to go into the last cycle here, which is magic. Again, I'm going from left to right. I'm even coordinating it with the Zulrah strategy on wiki, so that if you do look at the chart, it will be in order from left to right. So the next thing he comes up in is Mage, so I know in my mind, alright, I need to click on the Mage cycle, because that was second. I need to pray Mage, and I need to look at the chart and see what's next. So it looks like we have range next, and it wants me on the right side, and he's going to come up on the south side with range. This is probably a more dangerous part of the fight because, again, you can see all those snakelings on me that are trying to attack me, and he's going to be hitting me with range attacks. So there is some dangers. I would recommend bringing Karam ones. I'm a little more used to it, so I'm just camping sharks because I eat a lot beforehand so that I'm never really low on health. But it doesn't mean on the blue phase he can't just stack me out with 3 or 4 range attacks in a row. And if you're wondering, it's not really worth praying range when you're in the Mage phase. It's better to pray Mage because most of the time he's hitting you with Mage. It's a majority of more Mage attacks, so it is definitely more convenient to keep on the Mage pray. We're going to run to the left side, as we talked about earlier with our pillar safe spots. I am safe spotted on the left side, so I don't need to worry about anything but the snakelings and doing damage to the boss. Now we have the range coming up on our left here, which would be the east side on the compass. Wants me to stand in the same spot. Again, X marks the spot. Once you're using the helper, it'll be a little bit easier to see. I know it's kind of small on the screen. We have range again. Wants me to stand in the same spot. He comes up on the south. And like we talked about earlier, only in the range and Mage phase does he Jad on the left side. If you're ever in the melee cycle, he's going to Jad on the right. If you're in the range and Mage cycle, he's going to Jad on the left. So I know that I will have to deal with that Jad on the left. And a good rule of thumbs is his Jad phase is always the phase before the last. So if I'm looking at the helper on the right now, I see the final phase is Mage. I know the range right before it to the left of it is going to be that Jad phase. So the Jad phase always comes like one phase before the last, and so that's how you kind of know what to look for. If you had the attack icons on the Zulrah plugin helper, then you won't necessarily need to worry about that. And that's about it for our Zulrah guide. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for hanging out. Go ahead and drop a like and a subscribe if you don't mind. I would like to grow and drop as many guides as possible for you guys. If you have any comments or questions, anything I could answer, just leave them in the comment section and I'll try to get back to you. Hope everyone has an incredible day, and thank you guys for tuning in.